are the leading causes of death and disability in the United States? The Centers for Disease Control say heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. In previous videos, we explored the top causes of death or disability as separate categories and discovered that these three diseases are not the top three in either. Not unexpectedly, when we consider death and disability together as a union, heart disease, cancer, and diabetes are not in the top three there either. So why are they repeatedly lumped together? Well, it turns out death and disability is code for something else. These three diseases are the top three of some category, but it isn't death and disability. Time to lift the fog of what the CDC and other public agencies are really communicating. We'll uncover that missing category in this talk. The point here is to illustrate that failure to understand disease has led to twisty statistics and well-intentioned public health agendas that are largely ineffective against chronic disease. As long as we ignore our ignorance about disease or hide it under inaccurate beliefs, we're assured a sicker population, not the healthier one we all want. Be sure to check out CesariProject.com for all the latest on thinking differently about chronic disease. This is the CDC's landing page for chronic diseases. It displays the impact of these very common chronic diseases, stating that 6 in 10 adults in the U.S. have at least one. In the first sentence, chronic diseases are defined broadly as conditions that last 1 year or more and require ongoing medical attention or limit activities of daily living. That sounds a lot like the definition of disability, but it lacks the impairment piece. Chronic diseases such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes are the leading causes of death and disability in the United States. We saw that this is not the case. From a death standpoint, heart disease and cancer are number 1 and number 2, but diabetes is number 8. In terms of disability, heart disease and cancer are in the top 5, but arthritis, musculoskeletal issues, and mental health issues are in the top 3. Carrying on, these diseases are also the leading drivers of the nation's $4.1 trillion annual healthcare costs. Now we're getting somewhere. We know it has something to do with cost of care and money. When you go back and consider the cost of death, well, from a healthcare standpoint, death is free. Death actually reduces healthcare costs. When a person dies, the system is no longer obligated to pay for their care. In that way, death is the only reliable way to decrease costs and exit the system. That leaves disability. We do know disabilities are expensive for whatever reason a person may have a disability. They're costly. People need help. They need equipment. They need things, which is in keeping with this disability-like definition of chronic diseases the CDC uses up top. Furthermore, many chronic diseases are caused by a short list of risk behaviors: tobacco use, poor nutrition, physical inactivity, excessive alcohol use. If you have a chronic disease, it's your fault. 2 boxes to the side here, how you can prevent chronic disease, so we're saying they're preventable, and health and economic costs of chronic disease. We're saying they're expensive. The bottom of the page has a bunch of pictures that just reiterates the same information. So this website conveys 5 pieces of information. 1, chronic diseases are common, and here are the interesting ones. 2, they function more like disabilities. 3, they're preventable. 4, they're caused by your lifestyle choices. And 5, they're expensive. Somewhere in there is buried the true meaning of death and disability that will get heart disease, cancer, and diabetes the top of a list. Let's follow the thread of disability and cost. The CDC is a government organization. Well, let's look at another government organization that pays for disability. That would be the Social Security Administration. Every year, the Social Security Administration publishes the annual statistical report on Social Security Disability Insurance Program. This is a huge and complicated document to read. So in my internet search, I was looking for somebody who already did the hard work and put together a summary, which is what this group did. John Foy and Associates, Personal Injury Law. I do not know this man. I have no vested interest. He just did a very nice thing of compiling the top 10 disabilities that Social Security Administration pays for. 1, musculoskeletal and connective tissue problems. Arthritis falls in there. Not surprising. Almost 30% of anybody receiving disability, it's for that reason. Number 2, mood disorders, depression, bipolar, mental health, No surprise. Number 3, nervous system and sense organs, so brain and nerves. Some people might want to lump those together as neuropsychiatric. Number 4, intellectual disabilities. These are not considered chronic diseases per se. People are born with these conditions generally, though sometimes they can be in association with other developmental problems that create a lot of other types of disability as well. Number 5, so in terms of what Social Security pays for, circulatory system, here we go. Heart attack, atherosclerosis, heart failure, irregular rhythms, stroke, peripheral artery disease. Interestingly, it lists high cholesterol or high blood pressure, but it doesn't mention diabetes. Moving on, schizophrenia and psychotic disorders. Well, that's more mental health. Number 7, other mental disorders, mental health. Number 8, injuries, musculoskeletal. Number 9, organic mental disorders, mental health. We're seeing a trend here. This one does include dementia, by the way. And number 10 is neoplasms, which is where cancer would fall. I was interested at first when I saw this. It does say that neoplasms can be benign, precancerous, or cancerous, but when you look down at the main types of neoplasms, it lists 4 that are all benign. They're not cancerous. So my first thought was, well, cancer goes one of 2 ways from a disability standpoint. 1, you either die of it, at which point you're not disabled from it, or 2, you're treated effectively and maybe the disability isn't so terrible. I don't know. I couldn't really rationalize that. I know plenty of people with disability after cancer treatments. Moving down, there are some conditions that automatically qualify for disability. So there's cancer, and so maybe that's what it was. And even though cancer automatically qualifies for disability, it didn't show up in the top 10 of what actually is being paid out. It also included endocrine disorders. Is that diabetes? This is a group called disabilitybenefitshelp.org, and down here, can you get disability for diabetes? It says yes, but in order to get disability for diabetes, your diabetes needs to cause another condition that is disabling, at least for 12 months, and so the person can't work. So it needs to cause something else, whether that's hemodialysis or amputation due to circulation-related issues. But diabetes itself is not disabling, which is perhaps why we don't see it on this list. So we don't have any answers here. What we have found, again, is that these diseases, heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, are not the top causes of disability, and they're also not the top expenses related to disability. So let's broaden our scope. What are the most expensive diseases? This is the National Association for Biomedical Research. They use animal models to help us understand human disease, and they compiled the 5 most expensive diseases, which account for 80% of healthcare spending. Let's take a look. Heart disease. Number 1, $193 billion. Now that is direct costs. So that includes medications, procedures, doctor's appointments, referrals, etc. Real dollars paid out to provide care. Indirect costs include productivity losses in the workplace, etc. We're not talking about those today. Here we see the comment, thankfully, the mortality rate for heart disease has been cut in half in the past 30 years. So there's that conundrum. Death is the only way to reliably reduce the cost of disease today because we can't cure it. So by keeping people alive, you're going to drive costs up. It's just how it works. But of course, we take care of people, so we want people to have good and long lives. Plus, you look at coronary bypass surgery, that is expensive. The treatment is expensive, and continuing to treat people is very expensive. Down here, prevention is the most cost-effective way to combat any disease. We consider heart disease preventable by modifying risk factors such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. Okay, we're starting to see some things lumped together here. We've got cost, and we're starting to see prevention come up again. The second most expensive disease is diabetes. $176 billion in direct costs. And that cost may even be higher because diabetes is considered a gateway disease to other problems such as heart disease, kidney disease, etc. It is considered a preventable disease, which is paramount to lowering overall costs of care in today's way of thinking about this. Number 3 is dementia, $159 billion. And this also reminds me from a disability standpoint, dementia typically affects persons 65 years and older. When we looked at the disability list previously, it was the working age folks, the 65 and younger. So dementia isn't really going to show up on that disability list because this is really looking at a different group of people. Dementia is challenging because it has no known cure or effective treatment. That means we can't prevent it. So it's a very expensive disease that we can't prevent. Number 4 is cancer, $157 billion. Survival rate in cancer patients has doubled in the last 40 years. Unfortunately, so have the cost of the medications. According to the American Cancer Society, dietary changes, increased physical activity, and additional screening could prevent roughly 2/3 of cancer deaths. So again, we find an expensive disease that is presumably preventable. The last one on the list, number 5, obesity, 147 billion. Nobody's going to argue that they think that that's preventable, and it's expensive. Of the 5 most expensive diseases, 4 of them are preventable. So when we look at the top 3 expensive and preventable diseases, we get heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Dementia drops off because it's not preventable. And so there you have the real meaning of death and disability in today's world is expensive and preventable. Here's another source to confirm this finding. This is the University of Southern California Sol Price School of Public Policy. They put together a nice infographic here. The 5 most expensive diseases. Number 1, Alzheimer's. Number 2, diabetes. Number 3, heart disease. Number 4, cancer. And number 5, obesity. They're the same 5 diseases. They are in a little bit different order, but if you cross off Alzheimer's because it's the only non-preventable one, you get diabetes, heart disease and stroke, and cancer. Those are the same 3 on the CDC's landing page: heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, in whatever order they may come in. They are the leading drivers of the nation's 4.1 trillion because we're treating them, we're keeping people alive, we have reduced deaths, but it's made everything expensive. Plus, we believe that all these diseases are preventable. So if you get sick, it's because it was your choice. The purpose of this talk is really to establish the need for accuracy. Death and disability has somehow morphed to mean expensive and preventable. There's really no need to do that. Just say certain diseases are expensive and preventable. These are the kind of shifts that we see in the meaning of words as they pertain to health and disease. Death and disability really is talking about the disease process itself, the death it causes, the disability it causes. When you look at cost of disease, that's a downstream effect that relates to the healthcare system, not the disease itself. Also, our notion of prevention stems from a belief that we understand what causes disease, and the truth is we don't. If we did, cost and incidence of disease would be decreasing, not increasing like it is. If you needed any other indicator that we don't know what we're doing about disease, just look at how expensive everything is getting. But we fail to do that. We, as an industry, will not come out and say, we don't know what we're talking about. That doesn't stop people from using good intentions to try to control the situation, but without having the knowledge of what the actual problem is we'll never make any forward progress in making people healthy again and driving down costs as a secondary effect. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'd really love to hear from you. Please leave comments below, like and subscribe, and be sure to check out ZazariProject.com to get involved with the movement to make people healthier.